Welcome back. If you're just joining us, it's Daybreak on Trust Television, and in this discussion segment, we will be combining a couple of things that seem interrelated, and that will be the threats by the TUC, the NLC, to embark on indefinite strike, as well as that of the Nigerian resident doctors. Now, day-to-day living entails keeping both body and mind intact. However, it appears that the cost of living keep rising and workers' wages can no longer keep pace with development. Consequently, families are struggling hard with the harsh economic reality to make ends meet. And it has become even more difficult with the removal of fuel subsidy owing to the deregulation of the petroleum downstream sector. The present administration has inherited many unresolved labor issues, and now the resident doctors have down tools, and the Nigeria Labour Congress and Trade Union Congress are set to down tools by the 2nd of August, precisely next week, Wednesday. This is the direction of our discourse this morning, and we have via Zoom from Lagos, the first Vice President, Nigeria Association of Resident Doctors, Dr. Nard And Good morning, Doctor. And also joining us in the studio is the Secretary General of the Trade Union Congress, Comrade Nu Turu. Comrade, you're welcome to the studio.
Thank you for having me. Good
All
morning.
right, let us start with you, Comrade. We know that just about a month ago, it was, I think in May, in the early days of this, well, still early days, if you like, you had some negotiations with the government. And on reaching certain understanding, you called off what was supposed to be your initial mobilization for a strike. Now we are seeing another call. And the explanations out there is saying even though you have resumed conversation with government, this is about the fuel price hike. How do we marry the two? How can you be in negotiations and undertaking a strike at the same time?
Well, the Trade Union Congress of Nigeria, under the leadership of Comrade Engineer Festus Osifo, is worried. Worried in the sense that the understanding we are having with the government does not seem to respect good faith. Why am I saying so? We had a timeline of 8 weeks in our initial intervention, within which people should be able to see in concrete terms, in reality, those interventions. Don't forget, that is the more reason why we cried out that preceding the removal of subsidy, ideally discussions should have ensued. In that way, we will have been able to put on the table what we think should be done to, like in form of stopgap, to deal with the subsidy removal. And that is why we are worried. So if we promise Nigerians that within a period of 8 weeks, they will be able to see some practical intervention. Practical intervention, for instance, like the CNG conversion. If you remove subsidy and the cost of PMS is high, there is naturally an urgent need for an alternative, which is what the government did not think of ab initio. So if you are thinking of CNG, an alternative, what is the timeline? Because that is the only way you can deal with it. You can deal with the subsidy removal immediately. And again, the cost of goods, you agree with me, are going up day in, day out. What is government going to do in the immediate to cushion the effect? And thirdly, the issue of transportation is key, because a farmer requires transportation to move his farm produce from the hinterland or from the farm to the market. So we had discussion with various state governors, and each state has its own peculiarities. Some states will require buses. Those states that are, for instance, worker driven, they are public servants driven, they require buses to bring workers from their homes to their workplaces. So in all of this, the intervention gears towards the value of the minimum that the worker earns. Because whether you like it or not, you agree with me that for the worker to send his children to school, it's out of this minimum wage that he will do that. For the worker to be able to eat 3 square meal is from the minimum wage, and for the worker to even transport himself to his workplace is from the minimum wage. So everything centers around the minimum wage. But beyond the minimum wage, generality of the Nigerian masses living beyond the poverty line are also involved, because we buy from the same market. That is why we are having a holistic intervention to deal with all of these contemporary issues.
Comrade, while the organized labor has severally accused the government of acting in bad faith, especially with the approach of the industrial court to stop you from going on strike that you had planned earlier in the month of June, a lot of people also question the logic behind what you have planned on August 2nd. You're pretty much doing the same thing that the government is doing, negotiating, but also doing something that could undermine the negotiation. What are you trying to achieve with the protest on August 2nd?
No, that assertion is not correct. It's not correct in the sense that the law permits us to protest and air our grievances.
Yeah, but you have the negotiation to air your grievances. Why are you still protesting?
We have not even gotten there yet. What we are saying is giving them a timeline of 2 weeks within which all of the understanding we've had on the immediate intervention to deal with the contemporary issues confronting the Nigerian masses on subsidy removal is taken care of. So you don't jump the gun. When we get there, within 2 weeks, if the government is serious and desirous, I assure you, they'll be able to dispense with it. And it's just to put them on their toes that we have an understanding and we have a responsibility as unions to honor that understanding to the letter so that people don't continue to suffer.
The protest is August 2nd. I'm not sure that's up to 2 weeks from now.
No, you are getting it mixed up. The timeline of August 2nd was issued by the NLC. Don't forget, the NLC and the TUC had issued different ultimatums. And what we did from the Trade Union Congress of Nigeria is to say, hey, the 8 weeks we had an understanding is already halfway. We've 4 weeks have eroded, and we've got only 4 weeks left to honor our obligation to our workers and the Nigerian public. So, and we are saying within 2 weeks, all of the understandings we've had must be seen in practical terms.
So to put it clearly, the TUC is not going to join in the protest on August 2nd.
That is what I'm saying. The TUC gave 2 weeks ultimatum. Don't forget, we issued a war press conference preceding that of the NLC. So I am speaking for the Trade Union Congress of Nigeria and not the NLC.
And that's why I'm asking for the clarity. So you're not going to be...
The answer is very clear. So we've given them 2 weeks. That within 2 weeks, all of the understanding we had should be dispensed with, or else we might be compelled to...
All right, let us bring in Comrade Nnamdi or Dr. Nnamdi, as the case may be at this point. Doctor, good morning.
Good morning.
I'm sure you had listened to the comrade in the studio, and I was beginning to wonder, you also had some set of understanding with the government on what needed to be done as per your last agreement, which included the one-on-one replacement agreement and a couple of other things you felt the government could act on almost immediately. What has happened that has degenerated so fast to your calling for an indefinite strike all of a sudden?
All right, thank you very much once again for having me. In fact, when the comrade was speaking, there was something resonating in my head, and it's the fact that, the government has failed to meet up to agreements that they have on their own instituted. We had a reconciliatory meeting after a 5-day warning strike sometime in May, and some timelines were given for most of these demands to be met. We gave specific timelines upon which we expected that the government would have brought out some reasonable results. One of which was the timeline on the one-on-one replacement and the payment of the medical residency training fund. One of the timelines was for June 5th. I can tell you that we had a meeting still with the Ministry of Labor, still the reconciliatory body, 2-3 weeks ago. And when we assessed what has happened from the time the MOU was signed up until that meeting of 2 weeks, none, I repeat, none of the items had been addressed.
All right. We understand that you've had meetings with the Speaker of the House of Reps. You also had meetings with the former Speaker, who is now the Chief of Staff, and you had some other meetings with the Secretary to the State Government. What are the specifics of this meeting? Because we understand the SGF has asked you to give him 2 days, I think, to extract commitments from the president. What has happened to those conversations? Did they seem to be going in a way that suggests that this government was not going to meet the demand to prompt what appears like a coup on sick Nigerians in the hospital who had to be rushed out of the hospital yesterday? What exactly happened?
Yes, we had the meeting with the Secretary to the Government of the Federation last week. After our ultimatum had expired, he requested for 2 days, which we gave. And at some point, we were not even, our calls weren't even being picked again. We also had a meeting with the Speaker of the House on Monday. We also asked for a day, which we have given. But the truth is that all these are verbal commitments. And these are commitments that we have been hearing and listening to this ultimatum has been extended and shifted 3 times. These demands are not out of the ordinary. Now, what we are saying as very germane issues, first of all, we're talking about the one-on-one replacement. So it's not really something that might be tasking. It's something that can be addressed immediately. Release the circular for this replacement. The MRTF was already budgeted for, so you're not asking for something out of the ordinary. So we know that this demand, what we are appealing now is for the president, the commander-in-chief of the Federation, to address or listen to these complaints, because these demands are germane, and we are losing our members, we're losing doctors, we're losing health workers. People are breaking down. We're not saying a fresh employment, we're saying one-for-one replacement. If a doctor leaves the system, that spot, replace that spot. Replace with a doctor. If a consultant leaves the system, replace with a consultant. If a junior doctor leaves the system, replace with a junior doctor. So that vacuum, you're not changing the budget line, you're not changing the personnel cost. It's still the same thing. So that we just maintain that, so that there's no vacuum. Because you now see that there are longer waiting times in the hospital. You see that surgeries are being cancelled, and it's really taking its toll on the health workers and also on the patients. So we have tried to negotiate with them. We have discussed, but nothing affirmative. No action has shown that these things will be done immediately, especially for the low-hanging fruits.
Okay. Doctor, just want to get an understanding of what those non-negotiables are and some of those low-hanging fruits, and what the line of communication is like with the federal government as far as addressing these issues concerned. I know most of your frustration comes from the previous administration's inability to significantly address some of these issues, but one would say, listen, it might be the same APC as a ruling party, but it's a different sheriff that we have in charge now. What are some of those concessions that the NARD as an association is willing to make to call off the strike action? Because one of the major costs of the strike action itself is that people are going to really suffer as a result of the absence of resident doctors across health facilities in the country. I think the speaker reiterated that, the Secretary to the Government of the Federation reiterated, not that they need to make the point because it is obvious, it goes without saying. But what are some of those low-hanging fruits, some of those negotiables that you're willing to concede at this point as half measures so you can continue this conversation while you resume strike action, while you resume your duties, I beg your pardon? Okay, it appears that we've lost our connection to Dr. Nnamdi. We'll try and reestablish that connection, but let's bring the conversation back here into the studio where we still have Comrade Toro of the NLC to further double down on the state of affairs. Comrade, proponents of the government would say the NLC, the TUC asked for palliatives to cushion the effect of subsidy removal. The president just secured 500 billion approval from the House of Representatives, 800 million from the World Bank through the Nigerian National Assembly also, which has been approved. We talked about 8,000 per head to 12 million households where 50-something million people. You're smiling already because I suppose you're reiterating the disagreement with the numbers. But isn't that something worth considering?
Absolutely not. Because in part of the conversation, we also have discussion around the government urging Nigerians to tighten their belt. That is paradoxical. You can't, from one side of your mouth, ask us to tighten our belt while the politicians are loosening theirs. It doesn't make sense. The same time, the masses and the poor people are asked to tighten their belt. The government, on the other hand, is approving humongous sum for members of the parliament. And even the interaction we had with some of the governors, we told them that you can't live in affluence and ask Nigerians, to go home hungry. There is trust deficit already in the land. And I can tell you, the people in the rural areas do no longer have trust for this country, because the governors will be on one side saying, tighten your belts, eat 1 square meal in a day, while they fly jets here and there. And again, we have also interrogated the approval for the members of the parliament. Very few of them as against the entire citizens that mostly go home hungry or sleep hungry. So for us, it doesn't hold water. And why I smile is because, of course, the assertion is not correct. But I can tell you that we will ensure that our wealth, our common wealth, is redistributed. Redistributed in the sense that the poor should also have some succor. The poor in the immediate should also be able to have 3 square meters in a day.
You're saying 8,000 is not enough.
It's grossly
and
how much can you?
I think you're preaching to the choir if you say that, because most people will definitely agree. But what are you recommending at this point, away from the long-term solutions, as the stopgap that you've talked about? If 8,000 naira is not enough, what else can the government put on the table? Because it is not just the federal government. The states are also doing something about it. The transportation issue, for instance. I think River State has done it. Some state governors have jacked up their minimum wage. I think in Imo State, recently we were talking about Adamawa State, 10,000 naira per head. They're subsidizing fertilizer for civil servants, for people who want to have access to cheaper food. The government is also trying to cushion that. So holistically, what is the organized labor approaching the government with as a recommendation if the government's approach is not right?
All of the things you've enumerated are theories. Can you tell me in practical terms where those policies that you alluded to have been implemented?
Adama just announced yesterday.
Announcement? How does announcement translate to implementation?
Yeah,
Let's not get it twisted.
But
the thing is,
but you can't say every government is unwilling to help out.
No. That's not what we are saying. Yeah. But we are saying even in helping out, it must be with a human face. You talked about 8,000 naira. How much measure of grains, for instance, can 8,000 naira in the Nigeria of today guarantee? Just tell me. It's grossly inadequate.
But isn't this
and that is why we are looking
gap?
That is why it is. It is to some extent, but not to a large extent. Why are we saying there must be a holistic intervention in the immediate? We talked about the issue of CNG, like I alluded to in the fact. We talked about also provision of some basic food intervention so that people will be able to eat. I can tell you, if you go to the hinterland, the rural areas, believe you me, there are people that don't have the luxury of 3 square meals in a day. Some are clamoring for just 1 square meal, and it's not there. And that is why we insist that beyond the issue of transportation, beyond the issue of food, there must be some clear-cut intervention in the area of cut in governance. We need to eliminate reckless spending so that we can redistribute this wealth in such a way that some of the other critical issues that the citizens need to take care of, to exist as citizens in Nigeria, are taken care of. Food is critical.
Okay.
Food is very fundamental.
All right, comrade. I like the fact that you are very articulate. You have a clear understanding of what you think we should do. But there is also a reality. We live a reality in this country that we cannot pretend does not exist, which is the fact that this country is near broke. Broke from not being able to sell anything to the world other than petrol. Even with petrol, we have made nothing from the windfall because of what is described as oil theft. However true those numbers or figures are, basically to the level where some governors are owing in arrears of several months of salaries to the most minutest of the cadres of their workers, teachers at local government level and all of that. And if that is taken into account, when you talk about holistic measures, I suppose you're talking about something from the federal government as well as the state government, to sort of have some impact at the grassroots. If that is our reality, how are we going to achieve some of these interventions that you're talking about? Because if the money is not there to spend, they will end up making promises, and we recall from the street only to return back to the same condition in a couple of weeks. So how much information do you have there about what is achievable, what is practicable?
Well, for us in the Trade Union Congress of Nigeria, the first point is to reduce reckless spending. Like I said, you also agree with me that recently the federal allocation to states has jacked up. And we were told that that is also enhanced to enable them deal with the fuel subsidy removal, because you also agree with me that the states are, in quote, supposed to be closer to the masses, the state and local government. So I'm happy you also mentioned that even the 30,000 minimum wage that was signed into law several years down the line, most state governors are not paying, and we told them to their faces in the interaction we had. So the part of intervention we also brought to the table in jacking up their federal allocation is to say the government must take up its responsibility, even though it might be advisory. But the president has a responsibility to give the state governors some matching orders to say, I will not tolerate diversion, because most of the problems we had in the past is that the state government will be given allocation, they will divert it to perhaps security votes where they are not checked, where they could pinfire without having any recourse to audit or scrutiny. So the government can, in clear terms, say, hey, we are watching you. The unions and the masses are also watching. You have X amount to dish in XYZ intervention. Make sure it is used judiciously, otherwise we'll expose you. I think that will put them on check, to put the state governors on check, so that we don't go the route of the previous administration, for instance, where we were told we had cash transfers. I'm not sure any of you have a relative that benefited from that cash transfer. Even the social register they intend using for the intervention, we have queried it. What they do, politicians do, is to perhaps put up a list of their political cronies and do political patronage, which is not acceptable to us. So in all of this, we all need to put everything we have on check to ensure that ultimately at the end of the day, it gets to the desired public.
I think the NEC pretty much made this very clear, where the governor said, listen, they don't trust the credibility and the integrity of the social register, and they would like to have a look at it again so that they can come up with something a lot more tangible that will reflect the reality in their various states. I mean, this could also be an opportunity for them to also put the list of their political loyalists and so on and so forth. But as far as the approach of the states are concerned, what can you tell us about the TUC's approach, so that we understand if a new social register is coming up at the state level, the organized labor is as much involved in the process so that it can add a layer of credibility to the poorest of the poor that we're talking about, the vulnerables in our community, so that these monies will not be thrown back into the pockets of greedy politicians?
Well, it's very simple. You agree that the trade unions have membership in every ward. If you don't have a cottage hospital in a ward, you will have a primary school. That is the least that you could have. Then in some villages, you could also have secondary school, which suggests that we have membership up to the ward level. And of course, it is also important to stress that the Trade Union Congress of Nigeria have state branches in all the 36 states and the FCTs, which suggests that we are everywhere. We've got this spread. And I'm happy you also are towing this route. But ultimately for us, what is critical is that Nigerians should not allow their destinies in the government's hand alone. They also have a responsibility, like we are doing in the trade union movement. They need to also support us so that together we can put an eye on this intervention. It's not a hidden thing. If state A, for instance, is given 5 billion, everybody knows that state A is giving 5 billion and to intervene in XYZ. So we'll follow them up. I can assure you that we'll follow them up to the letter to ensure that this time around there is no diversion.
All right. Thank you, Comrade. We understand Dr. Nnamdi is also back. Doctor or Comrade, I'm not sure which one is the most appropriate.
I think he's a doctor first and a comrade at heart.
All right, Dr. Nnamdi, I'm sure between that on and off, you would have catch a glimpse of some of the responses that were offered by Comrade. But what's more important, it's the question that was asked by my colleague, prior to that hitch, which was, what are those things, that you think can be handled on the immediate that will see a shift in this or a reversal in the strike that you had already declared, so that at the end of the day, in trying to justify what needs to be done, we do not cause double damage, on the Nigerian citizenry that's contending with inadequate nutrition, as highlighted by Comrade Toro, which in itself, can result in can escalate their medical conditions and all that. What can we do on the immediate? Can you point to things that this government can immediately act on, and so that we can shift, we can call off the strike and move forward? You may have to check your microphone, Dr. Nnamdi, if you can hear me.
And you look at the demands that were set, you will notice that most of the demands, at least the first two demands, had immediate payment of the medical residency training fund, immediate release of the circular on one-on-one replacement, then payment of the salary arrears, payment review of the consolidated medical salary structure, a down regulation of the membership certificate of the West African College. When you look at those resolutions, you see that the first two, what was written there was immediate. And those are the resolutions that we feel that if attended to immediately, because that should not take so much. The one-on-one replacement is just the release of the circular that is responsible for that. The payment of the medical residency training fund is already budgeted for, and people have gone for the exams, and the second part of the exams is in October, November, and the deadline is July. So, those things are immediate things that can be done. We know that some things might take a process. Some other demands there might take a process. So we just need to have the government show us actionable steps that indicate that those demands will be attended to immediately.
Do you seem to be getting the support of your parent body, the Nigerian Medical Association? Because in all of this struggle, it appears that they seem to have taken a quiet lane. What exactly is happening to that relationship?
Well, the Nigerian Medical Association is like a father. We are children of the Nigerian Medical Association. So they are well aware of our actions. I know that at the right time they would come in. We'll always come in as the parent body. There is no rancor between the resident doctors and the Nigerian Medical Association. In fact, they are the ones in championing the consolidated medical salary structure review. So we really, I don't think we have any issues as regards our relationship with the parent body.
Okay. Doctor, I'd like to get your reading, the association's reading of the administration's body language. What do you make of it so far? The administration is just a little over 2 months old. And I think part of the question I was asking earlier before we lost the connection was that much of your frustration was with the Buhari administration and their poor handling of the execution of the Memorandum of Understanding that you've had leading up to May of this year before the inauguration of the new administration. What is your reading of how this administration is handling it, and whether or not you have confidence that they might address some of these issues with the urgency that it deserves?
Well, I would like to state something here. The Memorandum of Understanding that was signed in May, that was chaired by the then Minister of Labour, at the point of signing it, he insisted that the signatories should be the permanent secretaries at the various ministries. indicating that the government is a continuum. And since it was still the same government, that it would just be a continuous process. So all those agreements were really done by the permanent secretaries. They signed all the agreements that were signed by the permanent secretary. So it wasn't really, it's not really a problem of maybe a change in government. These are people that are in the system and understand what the problem is, So yes, we have had interactions with the government, the current government. We've had, as you know, we've seen the speaker, we've seen the secretary to the government of the federation. In fact, we are even aware of some meetings that are going to take place today with the speaker also. All we are saying is that we are tired of the promises. We would have these interactions, but we don't want promises any longer. We want reasonable steps. We want actions that will show that, yes, you are really interested. We've looked at the president's manifesto on health, and it's robust and beautiful. But I think it's time for us to take action, not just word of mouth, not just promises, and not just timelines that are not met. It's time for the government to take action, and that is what we are acting
Thank you very
towards
much,
now.
Doctor.
And I feel our actions progress in that direction.
Thank you very much. I think that point is noted. And to get your last thoughts on this, Comrade Toro, you heard what Dr. Nnamdi said about moving from promises to actions. You have interacted with the new government, at best with very close officers or lieutenants of the president. And you've spoken to some states, as you have alluded to in your previous comments. What is the body language? Does it appear that they understand the urgency of what needs to be done, and and how quick they need to move to the feet to arrest what appears to be an annihilation of the middle and the lower class of
I think the smile says a lot, but let the man speak.
Yeah, the truth of the matter is, you see, most times where the government have missed it consistently is in the show of good faith. We need to be sincere. People are suffering. If you go around the streets of Abuja, you see chunk of people trekking, not from their evolution, because they can afford it. That's the reality. And the danger is, we need to nip this challenge in the bud so it doesn't escalate, because it will get to a point, if we don't deal with it, it might go beyond even what we are seeing. And that was why in our wisdom we had some stages of intervention: immediate, middle, and long-time intervention. For instance, the CNG we are talking about, I don't expect you to be able to convert from PMS to CNG overnight, today or tomorrow or overnight. But the poor man needs food on his table. That is the immediate. He needs food. The worker needs to go to work. That is the immediate. How the government wants to do it, they just have to do it. Something must be done, and done now. So again, the issue of good faith, like I said, is very key. It's very key that we need to be sincere in some of the commitments we made. So far, so good. We met with the government yesterday. Another committee is going to meet today. By tomorrow, the steering committee is also going to meet, which suggests we are working around the clock. But ultimately, we are very optimistic, and we hope, all things being equal, and we will be able to deal with the challenges.
Okay, just before we go, we talked about trust deficit. You particularly highlighted how politicians could say one thing and do something completely different, right? And Nigerians have expressed that also over the years, over the past few years, especially about the organized labor. Can Nigerians trust you to continue this fight and to win it on behalf of Nigerians, especially with the fact that many people seem to think that you talk a big game, you back a lot, but there hasn't been a lot of biting lately, and that leaves a lot of people to question your ability to actually get the job done?
Well, it's dependent on who is doing the analysis. Don't forget, we are also Nigerians, and first thing first, Nigerians must be in existence for us to also exist as trade unionists. So either head or tail, we have a responsibility to ensure that the sovereign state of Nigeria remains intact, and that is what we are doing. Yes, I might disagree with you. I might disagree with you to some extent, because the issue of putting an eye on the government is everybody's responsibility. So all the masses need to do is to also come on board so that together, and that is why in some of our intervention that encompasses everybody, we don't do it alone. We bring on board the market women, the traders, and the civil society coalition. So
thank you very much.
It's a holistic thing, and we are all ready to go all the hog to
thank you very much, Comrade No. It appears we have overshot our lane, but the conversations are very emotional, and the issues, like you said, are many, and we will continue to stay on the issues. That's the only commitment we can make to our reader. Thank you very much for finding time to be here, and for being patient with us. We understand you have other pressing engagements, and thank you, Dr. Nnamdi, for joining us all the way from Lagos. We wish you a very successful day, and we hope that all of these impasses come to an end pretty much soon. All right, viewers, we'll take a quick breather. When we return, the show continues at the top of the hour. Please don't go away.